You don't feel like you're being manipulated. That's the problem. Manipulation isn't always loud. It doesn't come with a villain. It doesn't walk through the front door and announce its arrival. It slips in through smaller things, like approval, silence, expectation. It whispers, not commands. It doesn't steal your voice, it teaches you to hand it over. You think you're making your own decisions, but look closer. You say yes when you want to say no. You agree when you should resist. You explain yourself in rooms that don't even deserve your presence. You stay available, agreeable, soft. Why? Because you were taught to believe that being liked is more important than being sovereign. And somewhere along the way, that belief stopped being a behavior and became your identity. This is the invisible cage, not bars, not chains, but conditioning. Guilt disguised as goodness. Obedience dressed up as maturity. You think you're free because no one is physically forcing you. But if your mind flinches at disapproval, if your emotions are hijacked by praise, if you panic at the thought of disappointing someone, then freedom has already been traded for peacekeeping. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're conditioned. This is where Friedrich Nietzsche steps in, not as an academic voice in the clouds, but as a brutal kind of medicine. Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher. He was a psychological revolution. Born in 1844, he challenged everything: religion, morality, conformity, even truth itself. His works like Beyond Good and Evil, The Gay Science, and On the Genealogy of Morality didn't aim to comfort. They were written to dismantle, to burn away illusion, to strip you of borrowed beliefs so that whatever remained was you. And yes, people fear him. They say he was a nihilist, that he believed in nothing. But that's only half the truth. Nietzsche did believe modern values were hullabute, not because life was meaningless. He believed we had inherited meaning instead of creating it. He believed we had outsourced our thinking, our morality, our identity, even our disaster systems, people and traditions that had long outlived their truth. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth, he wrote, because they don't want their illusions destroyed. The Antichrist, his mission wasn't destruction. It was liberation. From the herd, from the guilt, from the soft manipulations that make you predictable and controllable. Nietzsche saw the greatest threat to a human soul wasn't violence, it was mental domestication. The slow numbing of the will, the erosion of self-trust, the internalization of other people's values until you could no longer hear your own. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because that's where most people are now. Not enslaved, but tamed. Not ordered, but owned by guilt, by fear, by their longing to be accepted. And Nietzsche would say, burn it. Burn what you were taught to believe if it no longer reflects what you know to be true. Ban the guilt. Ban the obedience. Ban the should. Because a sovereign mind doesn't borrow its beliefs. It forges them. You don't wake up one day and decide to give away your mind. It happens slowly, subtly, in exchange for things that feel like love, acceptance, praise, inclusion. You start shaving off your edges. You become agreeable where you were once sharp. You become hesitant where you were once honest. Why? Because the crowd rewards obedience. Because being liked feels safer than being real. Because the moment you speak your truth without flinching, the room gets quiet. And silence feels like exile. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He saw that people don't just follow the crowd, they worship it. He called it herd moraletia value system. designed by the weak, for the weak, to make strength look like evil and obedience look like virtue. Morality, he wrote him on the genealogy of morality, is the best of all devices for leading mankind by the nose. Think about that. Morality not as truth, but as a device, a tool for control, a way to shape your instincts without ever raising a weapon. If they can get you to feel guilty for your power, they never have to deal with it. This is slave morality. It's the morality that says, be quiet, be humble, be soft. It teaches you that ambition is arrogance, that saying no is selfish, that separation is sin, and so you fall. Not because you're weak, but because you want to belong. But belonging at the cost of self-respect is manipulation with a smiling face. Nietzsche saw this happening in his time long before Instagram, long before cancel culture, long before a world built on likes. He saw how values became tools, how people were praised for being small, how the masses feared originality and punished those who dared to step out of line. Morality, he said, is the instinct of the herd in the individual, the gay science. When you feel bad for saying no, when you shrink your truth to keep the pieces, when you perform strength while privately collapsing, you are living someone else's values. And when you live someone else's values, you become manipulable, because all they have to do is frowny and you'll fold. All they have to do is withdraw their praise and you'll contort yourself again. All they have to do This is the cost of herd morality. It doesn't just make you soft. It makes you available emotionally, mentally, spiritually to anyone who knows how to pull the right string. You become a reflection, not a source. But Nietzsche believed something radical. You don't owe your goodness to the group. You don't owe your conscience to the tribe. You don't have to be digestible to be true. In fact, he believed that becoming truly free meant leaving the herd entirely. Not physically, but philosophically. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Thus spoke Zarathustra, you will lose people. You will be misunderstood. You will feel lonely. But you will be yourself, and that is where sovereignty begins. Because the mind that seeks belonging will always be ruled by those who offer it. But the mind that can stand alone cannot be owned. If the herd is where your mind gets broken, then solitude is where it gets rebuilt. Not isolation, not loneliness, but deliberate separation from noise, from performance, from the loop of reactivity. Because a manipulated mind isn't built on weakness. It's built on unconscious programming. And to be sovereign, you must become brutally conscious of every thought that didn't start with you. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning gas. Yourself. Untimely meditations owning yourself isn't about being loud. It's about being rooted. Rooted in thought. Rooted in silence. Rooted in values that you chose, not inherited. Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch, the Overmanis, often misunderstood as a call for domination. But it's not about ruling others. It's about ruling yourself. The Übermensch is a symbol, a person who creates their own values, who burns away internalized morality, who no longer needs validation to feel real. He called it the revaluation of all values, a complete and total psychological revolution. Not just changing your behavior, but changing what you believe is good. Because if you still think self-sacrifice is inherently moral, if you still think people-pleasing is noble, if you still think guilt is a guide, then your mind is still programmable. But when you build your own value system deliberately, slowly, philosophically, you become immune to emotional blackmail. You stop chasing approval. You start asking better questions. Does this align with my values? Does this pull me away from my center? Would I still choose this in solitude? And that's the test. Nietzsche wrote, "Become who you are, the gay science not what they admire. Not what gets you praise, not what makes you seem strong, but who you were before you were shaped by the world." Psychologists today call it individuation, a Jungian term for the process of becoming whole. Nietzsche foreshadowed it long before Carl Jung gave it a name. He believed that most people live as fragments, performing roles, carrying borrowed beliefs, trapped in identities they didn't write. And so, you must step out of automatic agreement, step out of urgent responses, step out of the comfort of the group. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming exact, disciplined in thought, selective in influence, anchored in silence. You don't owe everyone your energy. You don't owe the world your constant accessibility. You owe yourself one thing: sovereignty. Because a sovereign mind can't be baited. It doesn't chase validation. It doesn't collapse under pressure. It chooses what to believe, what to say, when to speak, and when to walk away. And most importantly, it knows when silence is the most powerful response of all. Manipulation feeds on reaction. That's the secret. People don't need to control you directly. They just need to train your nervous system to flinch, to rush to explain, to soften your truth, to answer instantly, even when it costs you your peace. And every time you respond from fear, urgency, guilt to reinforce the chain they barely had to pull. But when you stop reacting, something terrifying happens. You become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. This isn't about playing games. This isn't about silence as revenge or aloofness as a performance. This is about stillness as mastery. Nietzsche didn't just speak about strength in terms of domination. He spoke of it in terms of restraint, of directing your energy inward rather than leaking it outward. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Let that sink in. If you can't direct your own instincts, someone else will. If you don't train your mind to pause, they'll train it to submit. Most people are constantly reacting. They scroll and compare. They see a message and feel obligated to answer. They receive a hint of disapproval and spiral into apology. That isn't thought. That's programming. And Nietzsche's antidote was the will to power, not power over others, but power over the self. The ability to act not from fear, not from habit, but from intentional clarity. The higher man is distinguished from the lower by his fearlessness and his readiness to challenge. The Antichrist, you can't challenge anything if you're too busy justifying your existence. This is why Nietzsche spoke of the individual who can say yes or no to life on their own terms. He saw reactivity as weakness, not because emotions are bad, but because emotion without direction makes you vulnerable to every whisper of expectation. And in today's world, you are surrounded by whispers. Social media weaponizes your insecurity. Relationships weaponize your guilt. Culture rewards your exhaustion. And every time you respond automatically, you surrender agency. But when you wait, when you pause, when you observe, before engaging, you terrify people. Why? Because they don't know how to control someone who doesn't respond the way they expect. You text less often. You don't explain yourself. You don't rush to clear up every misunderstanding. You choose your timing. You choose your silence. You choose your presence. And in that space, you become what Nietzsche called dangerous not in cruelty, but in sovereignty. You have your way. I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way it does not exist. Thus spoke Zarathustra. That's the mark of someone who cannot be manipulated. They don't need agreement to stand firm. They don't need praise to feel valuable. They don't collapse in the face of rejection. They move slower. They speak with intention. They act from alignment. And suddenly you're no longer available in the way you used to be. You're no longer the easy yes, the fast reply, the emotionally pliable presence. You become deliberate, unrushed, mentally expensive. And when your mind becomes expensive, few can afford to waste it. This is where it begins. Not when they stop manipulating you, not when the world gets easier, not when the guilt disappears. But the moment you decide my mind is mine, that sentence fully lived is a revolution. Because most people never get there. They believe what keeps the peace. They post what earns approval. They echo what sounds smart. They obey what feels safe. And their minds, open fields, occupied territory, governed by trends, shame, and invisible obligations. But Nietzsche didn't want you to follow his ideas. He wanted you to fight them. He wanted you to resist everything, even him, until what remained was unshakable. The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well, the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind. The dawn, a sovereign mind, isn't rigid. It evolves. But it evolves by choice, not by pressure. It adapts with clarity, not confusion. It listens, but it chooses what to keep. This is your task now. Not to be louder, not to be right, but to be deeply aligned. You don't need to react. You don't need to convince. You don't need to prove anything to people who only understand you when you shrink. You only need to remember this. You are the only one who can think your thoughts. If you don't, someone else will. So here's where you begin. Small blue diamond, stop answering every call for your energy. Small blue diamond, stop accepting guilt as a moral compass. Small blue diamond, stop bending to praise just because it feels good. Small blue diamond, stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You are not cruel for withdrawing. You are not cold for being precise. You are not arrogant for trusting yourself. You are returning to the quiet, to the stillness, to the original voice inside, the one that existed before the world told you who to be. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming, not a version of someone else's ideal, but the unfolding of your own essence. You must become who you are. The gay science, not perform it, not market it, not explain it. Become it, because when you do, the manipulation stops. Not because the world gets better, but because you're no longer graspable. They can't bait you. They can't shame you. They can't pull strings that no longer exist. You've cut them. And now you are no longer a product of opinion. You are a presence. You are no longer a reaction. You are a force. You are no longer a mirror. You are a mountain. Let them misunderstand. Let them gossip. Let them invent stories about your silence. You are not here to be known. You are here to be real. This is Nietzsche's lesson. Not to build a better persona, but to obliterate the need for one. And so walk forward. Not as the version of you they expect, but as the version of you that cannot be owned. Not as the servant of others' thoughts, but as the sovereign ruler of your own. Your mind is your kingdom. Defend it like one.